This meeting is being recorded.
All right. So we got a few people here in the room and all of you online. Hoping we still got people coming in, so let's give it another 30 seconds. But as you know, we're reading through Sri Nisargadatta's I Am That. We're probably 2/3, I think, of the way through or so. And this is a question and answer between Sri Nisargadatta and a room full of devotees. And this last week, we were talking about meat eating. Somebody were having some questions there, and its relationship with ahimsa. And
Page
so
number, some page number.
the page number, see, I don't know because I'm on a digital copy, but we are
224.
This is 243.
243. Okay, we're in chapter 54,
Okay, okay, thank you.
and we're into it a ways here. And Maharaj is there. He's just saying this in regards to the question of vegetarianism, spirituality, and and nonviolence, and all of that. And it's really a personal choice. That's what it's going to come down to. Vivekananda, I liked his ideal. He said that that he was uncomfortable with the fact that religion had gone to the kitchen in India, and that yes, there is room for conversation about vegetarianism, but he said that it is not anywhere near as important as it had become in the conversation about spiritual life. And in the Ramakrishna order, they serve they're not going to serve up a hamburger, but they serve goat and occasionally chicken or fish. Fish on a daily basis, actually, because they're all Bengalis. They call it river eggplant as a joke. But it's a personal choice, and Ramakrishna gave us personal choice on it. And Vivekananda was a meat eater and actually made all of the direct disciples, with the exception of two of them, as far as I've read so far, made them eat meat so that it wouldn't become a thing, that they wouldn't stand on the pride of having never eaten an animal. And in my own wonderings about it, because I've gone back and forth. In San Francisco, I was mostly vegetarian because the center was vegetarian. My own decision was my renunciation would be to be content with whatever was served. If someone brought me a plate of food, I would eat it all. And the only time that becomes challenging for me is when there's that boiled bitter gourd. That's the only time I'm really confronted with my limits. But to take it as it comes. And he said, Vivekananda said that it is the higher ideal to be vegetarian, no doubt about it, but that it's not important in your spiritual life. And that's even emphasized because the thing that really had me just let go of the whole conversation is the fact that all of the avatars were meat eaters. Rama was a hunter. Krishna, had his bow and arrow, and he saw nothing but the eye of the bird, not because he was trying to preserve the eye of the bird, but because he was going to eat the bird. And Buddha initially in the original stories died of rancid goat meat that the untouchable served him by accident. And that story later sort of morphed into bad mushrooms because it was so important for him to be vegetarian. And Jesus had that in the New Testament scriptures. Saint Peter has a vision where Jesus comes and a sheet unfolds from the sky, and on that sheet are all of the forbidden foods. And Jesus says to him, "Take and eat." And Peter says, "How can I take and eat that which is not pure?" Because the Jewish tradition also has a lot of food restrictions. And so here's Jesus telling him, "Take and eat." And Peter says, "I can't eat that, Lord. Those things are impure." And Jesus' response is, let no man call impure what the Lord has made pure." And so he kind of also removed the restrictions, the Jewish restrictions from Christianity through that vision. So there's no right or wrong in this. This is the outline of the thing. Now we're going to find out Maharaj's teaching here too. And Maharaj says, "I was born among meat-eating people, and my children are eating meat. I eat very little and make no fuss, right? So he also is our teacher here is also a meat eater. And I know it is very important because I was in North Carolina at the center there one time a few years ago, and a woman came in, and her first question to me, she didn't introduce herself. She didn't ask me who I was. She just came in the door of the center, and I was standing there cleaning the shrine. And she said, "Do you eat meat here?" And I said, "Some people do." And she turned around and walked out. We never saw her again. That was all she needed to know. And so here he's saying he's being challenged on eating meat. And so he says, well, I was born among meat eating people. I eat a little, and my children eat meat. And the questioner says, well, meat eating implies killing. Well, so does salad eating, right? That's the bottom line, is that mother, for whatever play we're engaged in, made it so that life has to consume life in order to survive. We can draw an arbitrary line and say that a lettuce doesn't feel pain, doesn't feel fear. But if you go purely scientifically, they have demonstrations and experiments where you can see that, yes, indeed, plants feel fear when a plant-eating animal is coming nearby, that they put off a chemical pheromone, and that they actually have a vibration in them. And this is scientific, because I mean, these are if you read that book, The Secret Life of Plants, you find that they've got almost as much going on inside as we do. And so we can take that route. You can take that route, but it's basically follow your own conscience and don't worry about what your neighbor's up to. That's the best route. If you feel the necessity or the desire to eat meat, do it. If you feel it's an act of violence and it goes against your conscience, don't do it. And, whether you serve it to someone or not is between you and that person. You make your decisions and give each other freedom and respect to make their own decisions, right? So, meat eating implies killing, the questioner says. And Maharaj says, well, obviously, I make no claims of consistency. You think absolute consistency is possible. Well, prove it by example. Don't preach what you do not practice. Coming back to the idea of having been born, you are stuck with what your parents told you, all about conception, pregnancy, birth, infant, child, youngster, teenager, and so on. Now, divest yourself of the idea that you are the body, with the help of the contrary idea that you are not the body. It is also an idea, no doubt. Treat it like something to be abandoned when its work is done. The idea that I am not the body gives reality to the body, when in fact there is no such thing as a body. It is but a state of mind. You can have as many bodies and as diverse as you like. Just remember steadily what you want and reject the incompatibles. Right. So he's really because of it's jnana. He's going right to the root of it. He's saying there's not even such thing as a body. And boy, I've talked about this so much this week. This whole notion that you are a thought, right? You're a thought that God has attached to, and by attaching to you has imbued you with Satchitananda, right? And so when you have a thought and you attach to that thought, you also give it life. You also give it existence, a motivating power, which is love, and an ability to argue. That's why we have conversations in our head, right? There's only one person in you. And so who are you talking with when you think? Who's the thinker and who's the listener of thought? Are they not the same person in there? And so the ultimate reality is that you are a thought among thoughts, as long as you're in the world of change, right? And all of this practice is to move to abandon the thought of ourself, the ego, that which we've given all of these other thoughts as attributes to abandon that sense of self and return to the stillness, the silence of the shrine in the heart, and become the witness of the changing world, and understand that it has nothing to do with you. That's how you cut the Gordian knot. Instead of trying to work with a therapist for 60 years, trying to get together of why your parents caused this and that, and how you've responded all the rest of your life, you don't have to go through that route. And actually, Ramakrishna is very clear. He says you won't find your answers there. Back in 2008, when I was diagnosed with that, well, actually was diagnosed after I went to the therapist, not before, but I asked Swami permission, because I was alone in the monastery most of the day. He was over in the office and there were no other monks. And I was depressed and it was getting quite severe and quite unpleasant. And so I went to him and told him and asked him, can I get a therapist? Can I talk to a therapist? And he gave me permission. He said, yes. But then he said, be careful. He says, go and do the work, but remember your spiritual principles. And he said, don't expect to find answers within the thought structures of the mind, because the mind will make up answers as you query, and they may seem reasonable, right? And since then, I read a little blurb about that what do they call that module up here, the interpretive module in the left lobe of the brain, that basically is there purely for the job of making the continuity of one moment to the next, and it will come up with explanations for anything. If you've never been asked why you believe something, you'll immediately have an answer of why you believe something, because that module gets activated and will give you an answer. And it's not concerned with truth. It's just concerned about maintaining continuity from one moment to the next, keeping your sense of self continuous, right? And so here he's saying, okay, we can talk about this food, right? We can talk about physical violence and what that means and all of that. But he says, let's go one step a little bit deeper, right? He says, let's talk about the fact that there's none such thing as a body. And at that level, things take a different turn. Something which is more important comes to light, right? Yeah, ultimately, all of us die. Everything dies, right? Everything dies. Nothing survives this experience. That's how we know we're in Yama's waiting room, just like Nachiketas, right? We're in Yama's waiting room, and we want to know what the truth is, and we're being offered everything but the truth in this world, right? To keep us deluded. So he's saying, let's come back to this idea, of having been born, of having gone through all of these cycles, and ultimately saying it's just a thought, right? And so the questioner says, well, I'm a box within a box within a box, the outer box acting as the body and the next one to it as the indwelling soul. Abstract the outer box and the next becomes the body and the next to it the soul. It is an infinite series, an endless opening of boxes. Is the last one the ultimate soul? Maharaj, if you have a body, you must have a soul. Here, your simile of a nest of boxes applies. But here and now, through all your bodies and souls, shines awareness, the pure light of Chit. Hold on to it unswervingly. Without awareness, the body would not last a second. There is in the body a current of energy, affection, and intelligence, which guides, maintains, and energizes the body. Discover that current and stay with it. Right? He's saying, find that unchanging thing within yourself. Ramakrishna gives that great clue that if it changes, it's unreal. It is the unchanging alone that is real. And so this current within that he's talking about, this isness, which is obvious to us, but it's such a steady thought, such an obviously unchanging thought, that the mind does not pay attention to it naturally anymore, because the mind filters out things that are steady, right? Puts them in the background. They're not important. They're only important if they're hunting you, right? And so change catches our awareness, catches our attention. But that which is unchanging lost our attention long ago. And that's why it's practice for us to find ourselves, to become aware of that which is aware and not what it's aware of, right? We're always at the wrong end of the stick. So that's what he's saying here. He's saying that through all of your boxes, whatever arrangement, and he says boxes because he's playing along. He's like, yes, there are so many ways to describe this reality, right? You can even see, just even in Vedanta, all the different traditions that we have within Hinduism to explain the reality. All four of the paths take a different view of reality, right? And so we can talk about this awareness or this reality in innumerable ways, but there's always going to be the observer of the reality. That's unchanging in all traditions, right? The absolute unchanging nature of the self, your sense of I, which has followed an ever-changing body and mind through your whole life. So bring it back to that. Of course, all these are manners of speaking, right? All of the traditions, all of the religions, these are all just manners of speaking and describing and working through this ultimate reality. Words are as much a barrier as a bridge, right? Words are a bridge in that they're in the scriptures. They are the scriptures. They are the words of the guru. But it's also a barrier. How? You need to place yourself firmly within time-space causation in order to form a sentence. You have to be separate from the object in order to form a sentence about it. Subject, object, verb. Every sentence to be a sentence has to contain those three. So that's a barrier. So while the language and thoughts and ideas and philosophies can bring us to the precipice, they can't cross you over. Right? They can't cross you over. That's why even in the Jnanic, even in the path of Jnana, that final stage, that final step is grace alone. Because you cannot take the final step. Because the final step is the dissolution of a distinct self, a self distinct from the whole. Right? If you take that, if you start to pull that off, that which is pulling it off is going to disappear, right? You can't be responsible for the final step. That is always the grace of God, right? Even in Jnana, they'll call it the grace of God. And you'll find even in this book, I Am That, he refers to the grace of God within here. It's not foundational. We don't develop a relationship with God in the path of Jnana. We just become incredibly aware. We start really observing the minute subtleties of the experience of being. We start with the outside, the gross stuff, that's the easy stuff, right? But then we step back and start watching the mental stuff and we come to learn that the body is a product of the mind, a step down from the mind. And it's not a belief, that's observable. But you have to get quiet to observe it. You have to stop being distracted by the gross in order to observe it. And then you can take a step back from that, right? And you can see the mind and you can see the witness, right? But ultimately, we even let go of the witness, right? And when you let go of the witness, you let go of that which it's observing. And that's how we come to the knowledge, I guess you could call it knowledge, the knowledge of oneness, of one without a second, right? But there's no subject or object or verb in that final state. And so as a jnani, he's always returning himself to that perspective and trying to bring his experience of life into focus so that he can see that reality as far as it's observable. And then that final step takes care of itself. So words are as much a barrier as a bridge. Find the spark of life that weaves the tissues of your body and be with it. It is the only reality that the body has, right? That spark of life, that Satchit Ananda is how we speak of that. That is the cause, the initial cause. That that I chuckle because here we're going to be talking about things that really we should not be talking about, but the mind wants to know, wants to capture it somehow. But that we have pure awareness, right? That is our nature, that pure awareness. And that pure awareness then becomes aware of itself, as it were. And in that awareness of awareness arises the idea of two, a subject and an object, right? And in that me and mine comes all the rest. Once you're separate, then everything has a separateness to it. And the mind is infinite in that. Right? So he says, the questioner says, well, what happens to that spark of life after death? Right? So this body mind, it's one of my little chuckles at the back of my head after being in Vedanta for this long, is that the first thing we learn is you've never been born and you never die. And the first question of everybody is, what happens when we die? Right? We've got a whole Upanishad asking that question, when the first truth is that you never die. right? Remember Ramana Maharshi, one of those great sages of the Vedanta. That was how he had his realization. Remember when he was a teenager, he said he had a completely unreasonable fear of death, and so he tried to deal with it by dying, by pretending to die one day. He laid down on the floor of his house, he said, and I just let go of everything and imagined dying. And he said that suddenly, he had his spiritual experience, his realization of the oneness of all things, right? And so I remember going up, and when I read that, I was in the monastery in San Francisco, and I thought, wow, cool. I can do that. Right. So I went up and laid down on my bedroom floor before lunch. I thought, if I can realize God before lunch, that's great. So I went up and laid down on the floor, and I sat there and tried to imagine dying. And I just simply couldn't. I could imagine things getting very quiet, but I couldn't, when I tried to imagine dying, non-existence is how I was seeing it. I was like, huh, I couldn't do it. I laid there for like, I don't know, 2 hours or something trying to do that. And so I came down dejected to the dinner table for lunch, and I told Swami Prabhupada, I said, Maharaj, I said, Ramana Maharshi imagined dying and he had the realization of God. I said, I went up there, I spent 2 hours trying to imagine dying. And I said, I can't imagine dying. And he looked at me and he smiled. He said, of course you can't remember. You can't imagine dying. And I said, well, why? Why is that? And he said, you've never died, and you never will die. You've never been born. Try imagining being born. You know, you've never experienced non-existence because existence is your nature, right? It's like trying to imagine being one without a second. You can't imagine one without a second because the mind simply cannot. Here we go again. One of our fundamental truths we keep coming back to. The mind needs that triad, subject, object, verb. Otherwise, it cannot conceive of something. Anything in the universe that doesn't fall into that nice little pattern, subject, object, verb, or time, space, causation, the mind can't think about it. So imagine how much stuff is out there that we can't think about because it doesn't obey that triad, right? That's why he says all of these are just manners of speaking, because we take that one without a second. And as we've talked before, the first thing we do to the one without a second, when we look at it, or taste it, or touch it, or smell it, or hear it, we break it into those 5 pieces, right? So no wonder we're deluded. The ultimate reality is one, but we see it from 5 perspectives through our senses, and then we have to recreate that oneness. So what happens to that spark of life after death? And Maharaj says, it is beyond time. Birth and death are but points in time. Life weaves eternally its many webs. The weaving is in time, but life itself is timeless. Whatever name and shape you give to its expressions, it is like the ocean, never changing, ever changing. Right? Never changing, ever changing. It's a wonderful thing. The easy way to think about that is you've got the waves on the surface, but if you dive deep, it's totally silent down there. I remember when I was a teenager, and I would go to the pool in the summer because it was hot out, and it was crowded. There were so many people in the pool, you could barely swim anywhere. And what I used to do is put on my goggles and go down and dive into the deep end and spend as much time as long as I could, a few seconds at a time, under the water in the bottom of the deep end, because down there it was absolutely quiet. And it was absolutely still, and there was no crowd down there. And I could look up and see the crowd and see all that hubbub. But I had my own private world at the bottom of the deep end. Of course, I could only experience it about 30 seconds at a time, but that was worthwhile. I would hang out down there, being the weirdo in the deep pool, the deep end. And so this ocean, changing and ever changing. So see yourself like a swimming pool. You've got your senses and your mind, which are the waves at the top. But deep down here, you've got a shrine, the shrine of the absolute unchanging. And you can sit there and witness all the stuff going on at the top of the water there, but you can experience the profound silence of this spark of life that is within you. And that spark of life is not just silence. That silence is the potential of all things everywhere all at once, right? It's an infinite freedom. And within that infinite freedom is the seed, as it were, of Satchitananda, right? The seed of love, the seed of wisdom, the seed of existence. And those cannot be gone beyond because they are the compounds, not compounds, they are the elements of the compound of life, but they themselves are fundamental. There's nothing before them. They're outside of time, outside of causation, right? So the questioner says, well, everything you say sounds beautifully convincing, yet my feeling of being just a person in a world strange and alien, often inimical and dangerous, does not cease. Being a person limited in space and time, how can I possibly realize myself as the opposite? A depersonalized, universalized awareness of nothing in particular. I'd like to print that on a t-shirt. Maharaj, you assert yourself to be what you are not, and deny yourself to be what you are. You omit the element of pure cognition, of awareness, free from all personal distortions. Unless you admit the reality of Chit, you will never know yourself. Right? This self that's unchanging, that has been you all of your life. And I'm not going to drag us all through the whole talk of dreaming again, but I will remind us of it because it's pertinent to this point here. You know, that there's a you at the end of the day that completely forgets all of the changing aspects of yourself. The body mind goes to sleep, right? And then you awake in a dream. And in that dream, you have a whole new body mind, a whole new set of memories and experiences, and a universe, a new universe that you're inhabiting. What is the same about you in the dream with the you that is asleep in the bed? That unchanged sameness, that consciousness, that awareness of the world, that awareness of the body, that awareness of the mind, it is the same between the dreaming identity of you and the waking identity of you. And so if you can sit there as a practice and think about all of the attributes of the waking self, and then go down into your dreaming self and think of all of the attributes of the dreaming self, and subtract those two subsets from yourself, you come up with that which is real, right? That crystalline point of awareness that is aware first of the waking dream and then aware of the sleeping dream, right? But it is that point itself that is real, that is eternal, and it's outside of both dreams. It is outside the waking dream and it is outside of the sleeping dream, right? And it's aware, its nature is the ability to see all of both, to experience all of both. And its nature is the ability to completely detach from either one of them and to completely attach to the other one of them effortlessly without leaving any mark whatsoever. So that is you, right? And as soon as if you can detach from this world completely and effortlessly, uh, then you come into the realization of your nature. You know yourself to be outside time, outside of causation. You know yourself to be of the nature of a pure love, which is what manifests when you manifest. You become aware of an intelligence, which allows you to repair your ignorance when you find yourself ignorant. And the constant steady, the isness, the existence, that which is always true, right? Whether you're in the dream or out of the dream. Questioner, well, what am I to do? I do not see myself as you see me. Maybe you are right and I'm wrong, but how can I cease to be what I feel I am? Maharaj, Maharaj, a prince who believes himself to be a beggar can be convinced conclusively in one way only. He must behave as a prince and see what happens. Behave as if what I say is true, and judge by what actually happens. All I ask is the little faith needed for making the first step. With experience will come confidence, and you will not need me anymore. I know what you are, and I am telling you. Trust me for a while. Right? This is why Ramakrishna says faith is the root of all. And that which gives us the courage to do this, well, within the bhakti circles anyway, is the grace of the divine. Right? In jnana, pure jnana, uh, you have to maintain that very high note of purity. Right? You have to be convinced that you are not the body. You have to be convinced that you are not the mind, which means you have to do a great deal of inner discernment. You have to spend a lot of time inside establishing yourself in the understanding, in the obvious knowledge. I'm not the mind, I'm watching it. How can I be what I'm watching? Right? So you have to be fully convinced in that state. And you have to stay in a state of being fully convinced, which is why Ramakrishna does not recommend the path of jnana for this day and age. To sing that high note, you have to be undisturbed. And you have to maintain that high note. I'm not this body either. I can see this body has to tell me when it's sick. It has to tell me when it's hot. It has to tell me when it's tired. Obviously, if it has to tell me all of these things, it's not me, because it's telling a me. So you have to spend a lot of time in that inner world paying attention, because those are just the gross awarenesses, right? Those are just the obvious ones. Those are enough for us to be in this delusion of constant distraction. But once you get those out of the way, a whole myriad of other distortions are there, misunderstandings, the subtle misunderstandings. Beyond that, the things that keep drawing us back into body mind, back into a separateness, back into a particular, right? Then we have to start understanding that not only are we not the body and not the mind, but that we're not a point, that we're in everything. And in order to establish yourself as not a point, as not a particular, but as an everything, you're not going to be allowed to have a single thought. So think of how controlled the mind's going to have to be. Think of how absolutely convinced that you're going to have to be and maintain that knowledge in order for that final realization of your non-point existence, your non-distinct existence, your existence as the container of all possibilities, to become aware of the sleeper when you are the dreamed, to be in the state of the dream and to know fully, I am asleep in a bed and I am the container of this world. I am not in this world. Think of the purity, the self-control, the discipline that's going to be necessary for doing that work without the grace of God. You see, for the bhakta, we do the same thing. We come to the same realization. Advaita is the end of all of the paths, of all the yogas. There is no Advaitic path. It is impossible to have an Advaitic path. Who's going to walk on a path if there's one without a second? Right? So you cannot have an Advaitic practice. All of the ways to the truth of Advaita are dual. Whether it's bhakti or whether it's devotion, whether it's work, whether it's mind control, or whether it's which one am I missing? Raja, bhakti, karma, or knowledge, whether it's knowledge. How ironic, the one we're studying. That's what I forgot. Right, so he's saying here at the beginning, what's necessary? Trust this notion. You're not body mind. Hang with me for a moment, even though it seems completely ridiculous, right? Imagine yourself in the dream. Someone comes to you in the dream and says, hey, you know what? You're not this body and mind. You know what? All of this is you, actually. You're everything here, and you're asleep somewhere. And all of this is just happening in you. how's that going to look in the dream? It's going to look just as absurd as this looks to us now, being told this truth. And ironically, in the dream, if you were to ask that person who just told you that you're dreaming, well, how do I find out that's true? Ironically, he's going to teach you the 4 yogas. Because the practice of coming out of the dream to realize that you're dreaming would be the same function as coming out of this reality and realizing that you're dreaming, right? That this is all a construct of mind. You are only a bundle of thoughts. Vivekananda says this personality that you love so much is nothing but a bundle of limitations and restrictions that you've placed on yourself, right? By those limitations and restrictions, what does he mean? Your gender, your age, your nationality, your hair color, all of these notions of self that you define yourself by, they limit you from being anything else. So they are your limitations and restrictions. So he says to get out of here first. Believe me when I tell you that this is a dream and that it's happening inside of you and that you are not inside of this like it seems that you are. You are an awareness that is super to this, outside of this. You're looking in, as it were. So our questioner says, well, to be here and now, I need my body and its senses. To understand, I need a mind. Maharaj, the body and the mind are only symptoms of ignorance. There's another good t-shirt. I'm a symptom of ignorance. The body and the mind are only symptoms of ignorance, of misapprehension. Behave as if you are pure awareness, bodiless and mindless, spaceless and timeless, beyond where and when and how. Dwell on it, think of it, learn to accept its reality. Don't oppose it and deny it all the time. Keep an open mind at least. Yoga is bending the outer to the inner. Make your mind and body express the real, which is all and beyond all. By doing, you succeed, not by arguing. Right? That's a very important little statement there. By doing your practice, you proceed, not by arguing, not by thinking about it, not by cognating. By cognating, you just drive the nail of ignorance deeper. What you need is awareness. You need to be watching how you work, not externally, not a body in an external world, but how does your body work with this sense of I inside? How does the mind work with the sense of I inside? If to know that you are not body mind, you have to find the boundary between the two. You have to become aware of how that boundary feels, right? And through that awareness, you learn how to withdraw from it. That's why the whole process is neti-neti. Why is it neti-neti? Because you cannot put yourself in front of your senses to look at, right? Then this is why practice is difficult. Anytime in the world that we want to learn anything, we take the object, place it in front of the senses, and start poking at it, right? You cannot put yourself in front of your senses. So you don't have an object to learn. What you have to understand or come to find yourself is through the negations, right? You know yourself by what you are not. You back into a profound silence. And in that profound silence, things become obvious to you, right? I remind you of that wonderful thing Swami Tattvamayana told me. I was helping him move his books into his room, you remember? And I was putting 14 big, thick binders of handwritten pages into his bookshelf. And I said, Maharaj, what is this? And he said, oh, that's just some of my unpublished works. I suddenly saw the difference between he and I, right? My unpublished works are a dinner napkin. His was 14 binders stuffed with writings, So I was like, wow. And so that got us into a conversation. I was really impressed with it. And we got to talking, and I said, we started talking about the scriptures, and oh my gosh, how much is there to know and to understand? And then he made a very startling statement too. He says, the scriptures are not there to tell you what God is. The scriptures are there to tell you what God is not, so that that which is apparent, that which is obvious can become apparent. Right? So the scriptures are there to tell us what God is not, so that that which is obvious, God, can become apparent to us, can be seen, can be experienced, can be known. And for the jnana, it's God that we back into, right? Through our negation of ourself, when we remove all of our limits, what is it that we are? We are that with no limit. We are that which is of the nature, the fundamental nature of love. It's not the verb of love, it's the noun of love, because it's the absolute unchanging. It's not the verb of existence, it is existence itself. It's not the verb of intelligence, it is intelligence itself. And that is what we come to know in that absolute silence as we do what he says here. We'll read through it again. He says, right, behave as if you were pure awareness, bodiless, okay? I'm not the body. And so we don't know what that means until we detach from body, and then we are that. We don't have to know what it means. We're so accustomed to knowing something by looking at it in the mind and having an understanding of it. But this knowledge, this inherent knowledge, is not known. It is. It is, and when you are not distracted by anything else that the mind is telling you, when you're not distracted by anything outside of yourself describing you, when you are in that profound silence of being, you know fully and with no doubt, because it is not a partial, it is the entirety. There is a knowing. That which is obvious becomes apparent, because you're no longer looking out. You're now aware of an isness. All right, so bodiless and mindless. So go to the space of silence, because think of how much noise comes from your body. Right now, you place your mind anywhere on your body, your awareness anywhere in your body, and there's noise coming from it. There's information coming from it. Most of the time, you ignore most of it, except those important parts that are important in the moment. But imagine going through, and this is what Ramana Maharshi was doing when he was imagining dying, detach from all this noise that the body is producing. And when you get done with that, you find yourself in the mind. Now think of the incessant noise of the mind. Start detaching from that. This is the experience of dying, right? The body starts making less and less and less noise, and suddenly it shuts down. There's no noise. And the mind, less and less and less noise, and then blip, no thought. And we think, oh, we're left with nothing. No, we're not left with nothing. We're left with that which was observing and listening to all that noise. But you're free of that noise, right? And you have no concept of what's that, because you're used to living in the world of expression, not in the world of being. And now you're pure being. You're not bounded by thoughts. You're not bounded by body. There's an infinity. And when thought stops, time stops, because time is actually the rate of thinking. And when that thinking ceases, you're outside of time. It's not a long time, it's not a short time, it's no time. And you can exist there eternally and not age, because nothing changes. All that's left is the unexpressed pure love that you are, the unexpressed pure existence that you are, and the unexpressed pure wisdom that you are. And in that is a bliss which, when experienced, just blows the circuits of the mind and body. Those people that go into those ecstatic experiences, the body just shorts out, unmoving. It cannot process that level of energy, that level of beauty, right? It simply shuts down. The mind blows out. It cannot contain that level of energy of pure being. right? So he says, just keep emphasizing. Okay, okay. I'm going to pretend. For now, we pretend. But as we pretend, the ego thins and we have to pretend less and less, right? Make your mind, body express the real, which is all and beyond it. By doing so, you succeed, not by arguing. Questioner, will kindly allow me to come back to my first question. How does this error of being a person originate? Where did this come from? Maharaj, the absolute precedes time. Awareness comes first, right? A bundle of memories and mental habits attracts attention. Awareness gets focused, and a person suddenly appears. Remove the light of awareness, go to sleep and swoon away, and the person disappears. The person flickers. Awareness contains all space and time. The absolute is. So he's not really giving an answer, right? Because the answer to his question is only has relevance if you accept time as the ultimate reality. But if you don't have time as the ultimate reality, if you understand that time is a product of mind, then the talk of the beginning is absurd. To talk of how is absurd. In the same way that if in your dream you flew last night, and this morning you get up and decide you're going to write down the mathematic equations of how you flew in the dream, that's absurd. You can't fly. Right? You never did fly. Your body was fast in that bed the whole night long, even though you flew to Japan and back in your dream. You see, so sometimes the questions in the dream, though they seem very important while you're dreaming, when you wake up in the morning, you don't sweat it at all. You don't even ask them because you're like, that didn't happen. Nothing happened. I built a house and there's no house. I flew to Japan and I'm still in my bed in Atlanta. Right? And so this is the problem with wanting to know questions that are bigger than your experience, that are bigger than your sense of self. All right, so the absolute precedes time. You exist before time. Awareness comes first. You first become aware, right? And once you become aware, still nothing is happening. There's just awareness. There's nothing to be aware of. So it's pure existence, pure being, pure love. Nothing is happening, no ripples. And then you become aware of yourself. Well, now the trouble begins. Awareness now has an object in it, a thing called myself, right? Now you're no longer experiencing awareness, you're experiencing consciousness. Awareness with an object in it is consciousness. And consciousness then produces an entire world, right? An entire universe, because the you that awareness becomes, the awareness that awareness becomes this is an exercise in absurdity, but it's fun, so we'll just keep going. That this awareness of awareness creates a sense of something to be aware of, an I. But that I is completely undefined because it's only awareness itself, right? And so in the imagination, which is the nature of God, identity is one of the names of God, of this pure awareness. That it fills itself with a story. For you to become a person, there has to be another. And for that other, we have to know that other. So you have to create a tool of knowledge, a sense, right? Something you can use to poke out this imagined other. And from this game, from this absurdity, from this unknowing, from this ignorance, from this play, from this whatever you want to name it, because whatever name you put on it is wrong. It doesn't exist, so it can be anything that you want, just like your dream can be anything that you want, and yet it isn't, right? In your some dreams you can fly, in other dreams you can't fly. Well, why is that? You've got the same dreamer, right? The dream is of the same nature. It's made by you, the dreamer, and yet in some of them you give yourself the ability to fly, and some of them you don't. In some of them you have a body, and some of them you don't. Some of them you're a bird, some of them you're a butterfly, some of them you're a stone, right? It's the nature of awareness to play within awareness. That's why it happens. There's not a purpose. Purpose requires time. There's just an isness. All right, give up all and gain all. We're going to stop here for today because I think, yes, we've got 3 minutes. We won't start a new chapter. So we'll stop there and